that point because I want to remind Adam that he was part of the Rudd-Gillard Labor government's strategy around the detention centres. When we came into government, there were 2,000.
That's not true.
There were 2,000 children within Nauru. We now have it down to about 104.
But
that's a significant shift. They are still being processed.
They weren't left languishing for years.
Yes, they were.
No, they weren't.
OK, Lisa, he listened to you, and we're going to let him have his say now, OK?
And the process that Peter Dutton has in place means that people are being processed. The services have been there. Now, you made reference to child abuse. Child abuse, it appears, was going on during the time of the previous government. Nothing was done. Now, there are processes that the Minister for Immigration, Peter Dutton, is working through. We have relationships
in secret,
with...
Ken? I mean...
but he's working with state governments.
Can I just ask, why is it that the people who work with these children and women in these detention centres are forbidden to talk about it publicly?
It's part of a contract they have with the relevant companies, but the minister...
The contract is imposed on the company.
No, the contract...
It's part of legislation that you passed with Labor's support to say that if these people do what on the mainland would be an obligation, on the mainland a doctor or a health professional would be required to speak up if a child was being treated like this.
Labor.
Because we moved to end offshore processing, and Labor and the coalition said, look, we have a lot more in common on this with each other than we do with the Greens. And so you decided to keep offshore processing. And now we are seeing that when you put people who are just coming here seeking a better life, when you put them in indefinite detentions in conditions that are worse than prison because they've committed no crimes, you break people.
For the 6 years, the Greens were complicit, so you
But I asked the Prime Minister...
I think we've actually dealt with that issue, so just leave that aside for 1 second. And Ken, I'd just like to ask you, we have a new administration, you could argue a more moderate cabinet. Will we see a change in this position? Because there is now a strong movement to suggest, and those doctors and nurses, in fact all the hospital staff that came out over the weekend were clearly part of that, of people saying it's long enough to have kept these people permanently incarcerated because they've tried to come to this country, many of them as refugees. What is the government, your government, going to do about it? What do you think they should do?
Look, Minister Dutton is working through a number of issues. The processes that he's putting into place is moving towards the transferees having freedom on Nauru. We will continue, and we make no apology for this, we will continue to take a hard line that enables people smugglers to cash in on the misfortunes of other people. And if we open the floodgates like Labor did, then we were tackling the same problems. So there is a need to have in place strong measures that we will adhere to. Certainly children in detention is something that no government likes, and hence the reason we've moved from 400 now down to 100.
Okay. Is there any kind of timetable around this? And the question that people really want to know is, are these small group of people relatively going to be made a permanent example of? Because clearly being put into detention for trying to come here was to make an example so others would see it and not come. Can that example be a permanent state?
Well, it wasn't an example. It was Australia saying we will determine who comes here. People of poor character, we won't accept. People who are genuine refugees, we have accepted. We accept 13,000 plus refugees from UN and HRC refugee camps, and we process them. We've made the same comment in terms of Syria.
Sure, but I'm just making a very simple point, which is that at some point the government said no more. Anyone who comes will now be put in an offshore detention camp. That was done by the previous government. You've continued it. Will it be a permanent state for them?
I think in terms of anybody who comes by boat, they will go through a detention process so that we take them through a criteria selection in which we then determine who comes here as the government.
But why can't we let kids live in the community while the claims are being processed? Why do they have to be in mandatory detention?
They're with families, Adam.
But it's breaking them. It's killing them.
But it's also, if you take them away from families, you run the risk then of a stolen generation if
So
we take the concept of what was raised.
So let
by the
them live with their carers once they've passed the security checks. Why do they have to live in indefinite detention that's breaking them and killing them?
I just want to hear from the other panellists here, and Tanya,